Well, welcome. I was planning to be with you today in person, and instead here I am at Universal Studios in Orlando. The laws of nature took over from the laws of desire, and Delta said they could take off and they could get to Washington, but there wasn't any place to land. So I want to congratulate all of you on completing your course on quality management and having this assemblage today. You know, one of the things you get out of this is you all now have a common language on quality and on management. And the art of management, you know, can be a dark and mysterious thing. It's not always possible to understand why some people are successful at it, and some people work long and hard and don't ever seem to get much done. And no subject except politics and religion brings forth so many books and articles and code words and fanatics. It's been my observation that people who manage often search continually for some silver bullet, you know, that's going to eliminate all the obstacles in one single action, and at the same time pull their organization ahead so that they can collect the Holy Grail, whichever one they have that represents success. And when the bullet proves to be inadequate, then it gets the blame. You know, all the things over the years that they've had, management by objective, 7 habits of effective people, 1 minute manager, TQM, all these things have perhaps not satisfied people. So they get a new bullet, they get a new rhetoric, and history repeats itself. And the result of this really is that very few organizations ever accomplish much. Almost everything that gets done is done by an individual. You know, back when I was a quality engineer 100 years ago, one of my responsibilities was to work on the corrective action team that the company had. So I went to this meeting every week, and they had a formal system where they identified the problems, and then they would talk about the discussion, and they would make plans, and they would have action and so forth. And after about 3 weeks, I realized that the list wasn't getting any shorter. We had 22 items on the list. So I took the list, and I went to the people who were involved with the first item. It happened to be purchasing and engineering in that particular company. And I asked them what was going to be necessary to get the thing solved for now, take care of the personal problem, and to prevent it in the future. And we discussed it, and this took about 20 minutes, all done in very good humor. And they told me what they were going to do, and I wrote it all down and said I'd come back in a few days and see how they were doing. And so for a couple of weeks I went around and did this, and what happened was of the 22 items on the list, all of a sudden we only had 1 left. And my boss was not very happy with this. He was not thrilled. He said, you went around the system. You know, you went around the system. We're trying to make a system where things get solved. But his boss thought it was a good deal. Now, after I left, the corrective action system continues, and in that company they still have the same ones, still have the same meetings. They may have some of the things on the list. The thing is that the system won't solve a thing. Having everybody work on some kind of system doesn't make something happen. It takes individual action and a basic communication. See, the strength of organizational life is that we have help all around us. And the weakness is that some things never got done because some people are never sure exactly what they're supposed to do and what other people are supposed to do. So there's a tendency sometimes to lay back and then wait instead of taking action. And some people who have suffered scars from getting into the wrong thing learn how to look busy all the time without ever actually doing anything. So those who want to see results are the ones that make things happen. And the philosophy for making things happen is built into the concepts of the absolutes of quality management. The absolutes of quality management are not a system. They're concepts. And if you learn them, you can make it all happen. So I define quality management as deliberately creating an organizational and personal culture, deliberately doing this, where transactions are accomplished correctly on time. If you think of the hundreds of thousands of transactions that get done in your organization every day, from answering telephones to delivering mail to making marks on paper to getting paid, doing all this kind of stuff. All these transactions have to get accomplished on time, and they have to be done correctly. And at the same time, relationships with employees, suppliers, and customers and the world all have to be successful. Not satisfied customers, successful customers. So bringing all this about is very personal. Very personal. You can't lay it into an organization. You have to understand it yourself. The organization provides the information and the environment, but making something happen is the responsibility of the individual. In the days when you could toss an idea in the river at the source and an automobile, a new one would crawl out the other end of the river, are gone, you know, if they ever existed. Today's professional is like a personal computer. All the capacity and versatility is sitting there waiting for the proper program and understanding to cause action. It's kind of like Windows 95. Concepts of quality management are like the Windows 95 of this sort of thing. They provide the tools and the basis for a knowledgeable individual to use in creating and maintaining situations. Make it easier to accomplish. You know, things change. My first book was written in longhand on a piece of yellow paper. The next one I wrote with mechanical typewriter, and then I had electric typewriter, and now I've got a word processor. I don't write any better, but the heavy lifting's gone out of the creative process. You know, last month I was in India. I've been working over there for the last year and this year too, helping them as they try to be able to compete in the world and have a more liberalized society. You know, anytime you think you got problems, go stand on a street corner in Bombay for about an hour. But I'm chairman of the India Quality Foundation, and the foundation president decided to bring together at his house a special group, and he invited the top people in a lot of different fields. He had a lady policeman who runs a 10,000 inmate prison. He had the top pianist in the country and a leading dancer, and two physicians, one who works in cardiologist, the other who works with older people. He had the top cricket player in the country there, and two college professors and a few others, and we all sat around. I had to put on a native costume too, and along with Peggy, and we sat around and very casual, and they asked me to give them a theme. They said, "Now we're all different. You know, we're all different. People couldn't have anything in common. So what theme should we pick?" So I said, "Well, let's pick prevention. Let's all think about what we do about prevention." Well, the pianist immediately started talking about how she has to practice 8 hours a day so that she can make it look like it's all very casual when she gets on the stage. And the cricket player talked about hitting the bat against the ball thousands of times, learn how to do that. The law enforcement officer spoke of building relationships with the prisoners and finding out their problems and setting up things so they could learn how to do something so that when they got out of prison they didn't have to go back to stealing. And the doctors talked about life extension by getting rid of bad lifestyles. You know, most of the things that cause people to depart this vale of tears early are lifestyle items, you know, like smoking and lack of exercise and not wearing seat belts and these kind of things. They don't die of diseases like they did back in the old days when everybody caught all those kind of things that we vaccinate against, of course. Vaccination is prevention. Well, by the end of the evening, all these people who came there thinking they had nothing in common realized they had everything in common. They have to understand their business. They have to prepare, and they have to have this common understanding of the need to keep problems from happening, not solve them, not get really good at figuring out how to solve this problem, but how to keep them from happening. So the same theme applies to the rest of us that work in the real world, and if we're truly effective, we cause problems and negative situations to not occur at all. And that's what quality management is all about. Now, one of the things that you all are as leaders, and let me talk just a little bit about leadership, and then what I'd like to do is I think the is tell me we have it all arranged here so we can have a discussion, a question and answer discussion, and that you can provide the questions, and Scott will read them to me, and then I'll respond to them. But in your level of responsibility, you're in a leadership role, and you've dealt with the absolutes of quality management. Now let's talk about the absolutes of leadership. And there are four of them. First is the leader has a clear agenda. You know, where are we going? How are we going to know when we get there? Leader has to be able to explain this, and maybe explain it hundreds of times over and over and over again, and has to be able to do it in just a few words. You only get a paragraph. I used to talk about an elevator speech where you get somebody in an elevator, and in 12 floors you could tell them everything you did or wanted to do. So you have to have a clear agenda. Now, also, there's two agendas. There's an organizational agenda and there's a personal agenda. What it is that you want to accomplish. What is it you want the organization to accomplish? And they complement each other. Second is the leader has a personal philosophy of management. Personal philosophy of management. What is quality? We know quality is conformance to requirements. It's getting all these millions of transactions done correctly and properly and on time, and having people understand their jobs and knowing how to do them. Finance is the nourishment of the organization. That's the fertilizer and the water that keeps things going. Relationships are the soul. They have to have a personal philosophy, not something they picked up from somebody, not something they prattle on that some guru said or something like this, but a real personal philosophy so that somebody wakes you up in the middle of the night and asks you these questions or other questions, you're repeatable. And third is the leader builds enduring relationships. Enduring relationships. Relationships are what life's all about. With your employees, people should be proud to work with you and for you. Suppliers should be proud to supply you and helping you. Customers should be proud to deal with it. The community should be part of that. So these relationships, how all the things you talk about, look and read in the paper, the problems people have with each other, husbands and wives, parents and children, school boards and teachers, and all these are relationships. These are relationship problems. And fourth, the leader is worldly. There are over 5 billion people that don't live where you are right now. 5 billion. And like in India over there's 920 million people in an area about a third the size of the United States. And in China there's 1.2 billion people. And all these people are out there and they would like to have relationships with you. They'd like to be your customers. They would like to be your suppliers. They would like to be your employees. They'd like to be something. But you can't look at the world as being right within 100 yards of where you are. You have to think of, when somebody says international to you, see what pops in your mind. If what pops in your mind is Brussels, then you're not very worldly yet. You got to think about the Far East. What's going on in Malaysia? Last few weeks I've been in Saudi Arabia and Malaysia, and I'm going to the Philippines in another month or so, and in Africa at the end of this month, and see what all these people are doing, what they're thinking about. And they look to you in Washington there, and in your positions, they look to you for a leadership role. So worldly. So I'm proud to be a small part of your accomplishment today, and I thank you for inviting me to participate. And I'm going to come up as soon as the weather clears and we get scheduled, and Scott and I are going to walk around so that I can shake everybody's hand and congratulate them on their achievement. So you go out and lead, and I'll wait until I hear from some questions here, and then we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. So I'll sit here and stare at you, and you put in the questions.